So a lot of people compare Bernie Sanders with FDR. He says that his democratic socialism is completing what FDR started, and that the New Deal and democratic socialism are the same thing. So the New Deal, in a nutshell, was the most successful form of human organization in history. It created the middle class. It was the first time that the middle class was the numerical majority in any society. For the last 50 years, establishment Democrats and Republicans have been dismantling it, which is the root of most of the problems we're facing today. The repeal of New Deal banking regulations like Glass-Steagall is what led to the 2008 crash, which we never fully recovered from. Wall Street has too much control over the economy and the political system. We have a dying middle class. So the New Deal policies are tried and true and would work again. In this video, I'll explain why democratic socialism is totally inadequate and in many ways antithetical to the New Deal.
The amount of tax revenue that we would get just from taxing the people who, I think your fans think you're talking about, the people who own a yacht, does not come close to covering what you want to pay for.
Not true. Not true.
Come on. You're saying by only taxing the top 1%?
No, what I'm saying is...
But it couldn't even work in your home state of Vermont. They were going to institute it, and the governor said, it's going to cost too much money. We just can't do it. It would be the entire budget.
No, well...
That's true.
Well, that's not... I'm not the governor of the state of Vermont. I'm the senator from the state of Vermont.
But he looked at the budget.
So the Federal Reserve should be the main issue, but Bernie has not done a good job of informing his supporters about its importance. Usually progressives are informed on economic issues, but I haven't heard one Bernie supporter ever bring up the Federal Reserve. I haven't seen any videos of him talking about it either at his rallies. He has talked about regulating the Federal Reserve and Wall Street having too much control over it, the conflict of interest, but he doesn't talk about how we need to nationalize the Federal Reserve and use it as a development bank in the way FDR would. At least Elizabeth Warren and Jill Stein have talked about using the Federal Reserve to finance student loan debt.
It's great, you know, helping millennials getting out of debt in terms of their college debt, but how do you pay for that?
Same way we paid for the bankers. We bailed out the guys on Wall Street,
right,
who actually crashed the economy with their waste, fraud, and abuse. You know, if you count the quantitative easing for the bankers, that was an additional $4.5 trillion, which is far more than what we need for student debt, which is about $1.3 trillion. So, you know, we did a quantitative
easing, though, was from the Federal Reserve. So are you asking, are you saying that the Federal Reserve should pay for this?
Well, no, you don't pay for it. The Federal Reserve basically cancels the debt. It doesn't cost taxpayers one penny. And the reason it's good to do it for students is that it actually expands the economy. It's the stimulus package of our dreams to put to work a whole generation of young people that's held hostage in debt.
Dr. Stein, you say that quantitative easing is the way that you would do this, but you know a lot of economists say that that drives up inflation, that it encourages debt, that it actually threatens the U.S. dollar, and countries typically use this when there's really no other option.
What they're saying, well, they're absolutely right when you're talking about bailing out banks, who just essentially use that bailout to do more of that gambling at taxpayers' expense.
But they did pay the bailout back, Dr. Stein. The banks have paid back the U.S. government.
They paid back that $800 billion TARP plan. That's what they paid back. They didn't pay back the quantitative easing, which was simply a cancellation of the debt. And that is inflationary when you expand the money supply without creating more productivity in the economy.
Nationalize banks?
Yes, all of the above. And in fact, this is not something that even has to go through Congress. It's not so hard. What it takes is a president who actually supports regulating Wall Street. It could be done right now, and it doesn't have to go through Congress. Through the executive power over the agencies, the president can do what's needed, which is essentially to require so-called minimum capital requirements. Fancy words, but it means that we can downsize the banks right now based on their degree of risk, which is proportional to their size and to their reckless gambling of Congress. But there are all kinds of things that Congress needs to do as well.
Including a public banking system.
A public banking system, and making the Fed a public institution rather than a private institution.
A money trough for big banks.
For private banks,
yeah.
Exactly.
Federal Reserve credit can be used for a lot more than just student loan debt. I don't know why she's only emphasizing that. We can use federal credit for infrastructure since it's way overdue, and that would create millions of jobs. A lot of the New Deal infrastructure programs were funded by federal credit.
Doesn't even matter.
Well, I'm not a historian of financial matters, but
So Bernie wants to regulate the Federal Reserve, but not use it as a national development bank. He wants to do everything on budget, and that takes too long, and it's not good enough for a full recovery. His solutions are more Keynesian and monetarist, and that's antithetical to what FDR was. FDR was not a Keynesian. These monetarists want you to believe that if you create all this credit out of nowhere, that's inflationary. But if you're creating millions of jobs and you're creating productivity, it pays for itself eventually. These Wall Street oligarchs don't want a middle class or manufacturing. They just want a speculative economy where they control more and more of the wealth at the expense of the real economy. Bernie's infrastructure plan, the Rebuild America Act, is kind of pathetic. He wants to spend $1 trillion over 5 years, which is not nearly enough. The Trump infrastructure plan is $2 trillion. A lot of that's probably going to come from private corporations. It says to be paid for by closing corporate income tax loopholes in overseas tax havens. That's a good start, but the American Society of Civil Engineers say that we're going to need near $4 trillion to fix our infrastructure. That could be paid for by credit from the Federal Reserve. The New Deal plan for infrastructure would create 40 million jobs. That's full employment. Bernie's infrastructure plan would only create 13 million jobs. The Federal Reserve was a de facto national bank under FDR. He never officially nationalized it. He would force it to issue credit, and he would set interest rates. He also used the Reconstruction Finance Corporation to issue credit as well.
Roosevelt used the Reconstruction Finance Corporation as a quasi-national bank to reestablish the credit of the nation. He built schools, libraries, airports, post offices, and all with government-issued credit. He reestablished the U.S. currency, stabilized the price of gold, and opened a penetrating investigation into the rampant speculation on Wall Street, all within the first 100 days of his administration.
pre-tuition in public colleges and universities. You know how we pay for that? Through a tax on Wall Street speculation.
Okay.
So another issue that Bernie has failed to bring to public consciousness is the Wall Street sales tax, or the Robin Hood tax. It's on his website, but I don't hear his supporters talk about that much either. Wall Street doesn't pay any sales tax on their turnover, and that would produce a lot of revenue for the federal budget. The problem with Bernie's sales tax is that it's not enough. It's only 0.5%. A lot of the economists and experts who support the Wall Street sales tax, the consensus is twice that. It's 1%. And like the student loan issue, he wants to use the sales tax only for education when it can be used for a lot more than that in the federal budget. And if you're wondering why only 1%, or why not 2%, and why not 10%, I'm not informed enough on that to know, but the experts say that anything over 1% would not be realistic as far as investment in Wall Street.
My question to you, I guess, is the word socialist. I want to get right to this because I want to help your campaign. I want to see you get the nomination. I want to see you do that. I don't know if we're still undemonizing this word socialism. 2 polls on who people would vote for, like would people vote for a woman, a Jew, a black? 58% would vote for an atheist. Socialist, 47. It's at the very bottom of the ballot. They hear socialist, they think herpes, Bernie. We have to get this.
If you want to win the presidency, you have to appeal to all demographics, and socialism is just too fringe of a term. It has too much baggage. Why not just call it the New Deal? The New Deal is American. It's already available. It's tried and true. And you want to appeal to Joe Sixpack, just regular working people, not just the radicals. And even you want to appeal to even to some people that would vote for Trump, because there's a lot of people voted for Trump because on economic issues, he ran to the left of Hillary on free trade and bringing jobs back. So by calling it socialism, you're helping the Republican demagogues and the establishment Democrats say this is extreme, this is Marxism. And we don't need to borrow from a Scandinavian system when we have the New Deal, an American system.
You always say that, and I think even the Republicans are not for income inequality. They hear that, but it doesn't compute that that's going to be solved by socialism. Socialism is the programs they already like. They like Social Security. That's socialism. They like Medicare. They like the VA. They like the military.
No, that's exactly right.
It's already a socialist country.
But what we have to... No, it's not a socialist country.
It's quasi.
Social Security and all these programs came out of the New Deal. Socialism usually means that everything is nationalized. It's not a mixed economy, and people don't want that. That's not what the New Deal is. So why would you tell these Republicans that like New Deal entitlements to call it socialism?
We have to make the movement, if you like, to correlate what we're talking about. Because on every one of the major issues I am talking about, the American people agree.
Yes, that's true. Most of these populist issues and solutions are not that radical. People would agree, so that's why you should stop calling it socialism and call it the New Deal. So democratic socialism is not the New Deal. It pales in comparison. The New Deal is American, it's accessible, it doesn't have the stigma of socialism. Look into the Federal Reserve and the Wall Street sales tax. Everything else is secondary. So Bernie is not as smart as you think he is. He's not the total package like a lot of progressives think. He has many blind spots. If you want to be informed on economic issues, do not regard him as an authority. He's more of an ideologue. So check out the links below and comment and subscribe. Thanks.